wave in investing. I'm not sure it's a new wave, but there are new elements of it. Angels, incubators, accelerators, labs, and crowdfunding. We've got an interesting mix of folks from the funding side, investment banking side, corporate strategic side. My background is in technology, media, telecom, private equity, venture capital. General partner with Genovation Capital, a firm based in Boston. So what we'll do today is we'll go through, let everybody introduce themselves, what their companies do. I'll pose a few questions to the panel. We'll get a dialogue going, and then towards the end, for the last 10 or 15 minutes, we will allow you folks to ask them questions as well. So we'll start out with, next to me, was it Brad or B-Rad?
B-Rad.
B-Rad Wyman, who is the Chief Creative Officer of Fund Anything. Brad, if you could just tell us a little bit about Anything.
Exactly. Hi, I'm Brad Wyman. Nice to meet y'all. Used to be a movie producer. Produced about 40 motion pictures. Tried to figure out where my convergence online, where I could actually find a creative place to succeed online was. I always said as a movie producer, rule number 1 was get the money. Rule number 2 was never forget to get the money. And rule number 3 was always to remember to never forget to get the money. When crowdfunding emerged, the light bulb went off. That's getting the money online. I worked on all the various platforms, actually spent a year running Indiegogo's vertical for entertainment, where I tripled the transactions. Most recently, I've joined Fund Anything, about a 7-month-old company that funds anything. We've been around just about 6 months. We already have $2 million entertainment campaigns. Indiegogo's never had one. And Kickstarter took 4 years. They only have 3. So we kind of are pretty good, as I believe I am, at raising money online.
Terrific. Brian Bedell, certainly last but not least to arrive, since we were together before everybody. But Brian is the co-founder and CEO of Bedrocket. Tell us a little bit about some of the cool stuff you're doing.
So Bedrocket is a media company that also does angel investing in the media and entertainment ecosystem. We have content verticals that we operate, as well as a next generation video platform that our content verticals sit on, and we try to support the emerging ecosystem that is helping to in some cases drive, in some cases to benefit from the paradigm shift in media. I have long been both an investor and an operator. Started in the cable business, was involved in a handful of startups in the cable business back from in the bleachers during the launch of MTV, helped launch a couple of channels myself, and then started something called Classic Sports Network, which we sold to ESPN, and College Sports Television, which is now part of CBS.
I love that station, by the way.
Oh, good. And that was sort of our first experience in convergence between experiencing sports online and getting it in a 24-hour linear environment. So, our focus really is how can we help support those who ultimately are going to be part of this network that we're participating in.
Terrific. Urs Seat is the Managing Director of BDMI, Bertelsmann Digital Media Investments. Urs, tell us a little bit about some of the things you're doing at Bertelsmann.
So I run Bertelsmann's corporate venture capital fund. Bertelsmann is a big media company. They own RTL Group, which is Europe's largest broadcaster, which also owns Fremantle, which is one of the larger production companies out here. But also big in books. Penguin Random House is the division, and in magazines, we're kind of the largest, I think, in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. I run the venture fund, so we invest, not in anything, but we invest in startups, digital media related startups. We're investing out of 2 funds. We have a very small seed fund that is doing the $50,000 to $250,000 check, fast turnaround, only following. And then our main fund is writing the up to $4 million check into the A and B rounds that we kind of typically look at. And we behave more like a financial VC, but hope to bring some strategic value as well. That's why I kind of try to hijack this panel. I mean, it doesn't say corporates as another source of funding, but if you look, I mean, there are some segments out there, like, the MCN space or the YouTube space, where I think most of the investors in there in the last rounds were actually big corporates that helped invest in that space. So that's why I'm here.
Terrific. Elgin Thompson is the managing director of Markham Cronus Partners. You guys are an investment banking firm.
Right. Hello, everyone. I lead our digital media and internet technologies practice at Markham Cronus, boutique M&A firm. We also raise capital for emerging growth companies. My background, M&A lawyer for 7 years, transitioned after Stanford Business School, big media, investment banking with Merrill and Bear, and then transitioned to work for a client to run an online video technology startup. We sold that, and then I jumped back into banking. So try to bring a little different perspective to advising both early stage companies as well as kind of emerging growth and established companies.
Terrific. Chase Garbarino is the co-founder and CEO of Streetwise Media. At least I'm from Boston, so I know of Streetwise, but tell us a little about what you're doing.
Yeah, so Streetwise is a online news company. We started our first publication in Boston in around 2010. The idea was to provide daily news source that was competitive with the local big daily there, focused for a little bit of a younger crowd. We raised a little bit of venture financing in 2011, launched a second publication in DC. The Boston publication is called Bostino. The DC publication is called In the Capital. And in November 2012, we were acquired by a division of Advanced Publications, which owns Condé Nast, the Business Journals, and a number of other media companies.
Terrific. And last, Moise Courage, who's the Senior VP of Technology, Media and Telecom for Focal Point. Tell us a little bit about Focal Point.
Yeah, so it's Moyez. Nice to meet you guys. Focal Point really focuses on the entrepreneur, and our goal is we're an investment banker, so we advise on processes you hear about investment banking, the meat and potatoes of the banking world, which is the sale process. But we do a lot more than that. We look to support equity needs of entrepreneurs. We look to help diversify your asset, because when you have a business, it's your only asset, it's your most valuable asset, and so there's a stage where you're going to want to liquidate some of it, but still own a majority of the company. And Focal Point helps with that. We also help in stages which none of you will ever have to deal with, which is restructuring. So if you have a creditor sitting on your back, we can help you address that. I focus on tech and media and telecom. My background is not the typical banker background. I actually have a master's in engineering. I have an undergraduate in aerospace engineering. I spent 10 years in technology. I was the head of engineering at a startup company that penetrated and broke into the Starwood brand. So if they were stated 4 Seasons or a W, the entertainment system in that room was the one I designed. It's still the entertainment system in that room. I left the company in 2004, got my MBA, and I've been doing banking for a decade now. So, diverse background. I understand the entrepreneur. I understand how challenging it is to go into the financial world and get beaten over the head by the financial guys. Not like any of these guys, but the other financial guys. And try and represent the entrepreneur.
Terrific. So, I read an article that Kickstarter has surpassed $1 billion in funds raised, so it's sort of good timing for us to talk about crowdfunding maybe first. And last year, depending on the sources, about $5+ billion were actually raised through crowdfunding. So there's really 2 types of crowdfunding. You got the donation-based crowdfunding, like we've seen with Kickstarter, and then you've got investment-based crowdfunding. And it'd be good if you guys could give us a sense of your views on one approach or the other from an entrepreneur's perspective, and also from a investor's perspective, if you're looking at a company that's sort of gone through one of those processes, whether or not you think that's one is more valuable than the other. And let any of you start.
I guess I'll lead.
Okay.
The interesting thing too, $5 billion, I think it was about $5 billion last year. I think you're accurate. Right now, in pretty much everyone's latest polls and analytic, only about 8% of the United States even knows what the term crowdfunding is. So it's just going to get bigger. I truly believe that the last 10 years online was just about figuring out how to do transactions. I mean, I remember people were scared to put their credit card in and use Amazon or eBay. I think this next 10 years, and we're just at the beginning of it, is about finance online. Now, there are two basic ways that he threw the question out. One is what we don't like to call donation. It's how can you put it? It's profanity in our business. It's contributions. Reward-based means you contribute because you do get something back. This is not a donation. This is not a write-off. If it's a movie, it could be the DVD, the T-shirt. If it's a product, it could be a Pebble watch or a 3D printer. But when you contribute in financing the beginning of a company, you are actually receiving a product, so it's a contribution. Now, the wonderful thing about the way the world exists now in regards to all of probably the most known crowdfunding sites, Kickstarter, the brand name, the Kleenex, if you may, Fund Anything, Rocket Hub, Indiegogo, there's 526 of us actually, when you crowdfund on a contribution or a reward basis, you actually own all your equity. You haven't sold anything. If you're making a movie and you raised a couple $1 million, you still own the negative. So it's a pretty cool thing. Now, equity does exist now on a very limited basis through accredited investors on a few sites. One that just comes to mind because I've been reading about it and I think it's great. It's called Realty Mogul. It's a real estate site. And you do need to be an accredited investor to come in as a debt-based or mortgage-based. There are things like Angels List and Slated and other places that are forming what I'd call more like clubs to actually do investment online in crowdfunding basis. But the Jobs Act is passed. The SEC has published the rules. We are now waiting for the final stamp when anybody will actually be able to make an investment online, anybody, for some sort of stock or some sort of percentage of a company. Hopefully that will happen this year. Most people believe it will. I think that's fabulous, because right now we're in a world where people are only funding things online by bringing their audience and their crowd to that individual page. That's how things are financed through any platform. You're bringing your crowd to it. But the moment equity becomes available, you might even see all of our friends here with their big checkbooks on a Sunday looking and saying, hey, maybe I'll take a piece of that, or maybe I'll take a piece of that. So it'll actually turn, I think, finance over this next decade online into a sort of stock exchange, if you may.
So you talked a little bit about the Jobs Act, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Brian, do you look at a company and how they've done on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or other crowdsourced sites?
Fund Anything.
Can't keep doing a commercial. And does that have any impact on how you think about a company and investing in them, or do you find is it a positive, is it a negative?
Well, I would even throw something like YouTube into the mix, even though there isn't a direct revenue source that we can look at from an individual creator. But I think that anything that provides more information, more access about a potential investment, and anything that provides a bigger pool of opportunities both for investors and for those looking for investments is good. So there, it used to be that someone needed to make their way through the filter and through the screen to get to your office and get an appointment to sit down with you and to present something. I think that one of the things that the crowdfunding sites provide is an opportunity not just for those looking for investment or those looking for support to find the financial support, but for investors, it provides a great opportunity in a structured way to look at many more opportunities than one would otherwise have the chance to look at. You know, I think in a way, it's technology enabling something that has happened in other ways for many years. You know, I think about back in the early days of the home video business, it was often built on pre-sales. And before you would actually go and produce something, you would go to the video conventions or go to the Blockbusters and see if, on the original side and even on the scripted side, if you could generate enough pre-sales to generate revenue to allow you to go ahead with production. Now it just happens to take place on a more formal platform on a more structured basis. So, you know, I think from our standpoint, it's good, it gives more information, but nothing compares to looking in the eyes of the entrepreneur and having the opportunity, you know, if you're going to truly invest, to really understand the person who's sitting behind the idea.
You think there's a risk of a false positive, that marketing around the idea might not necessarily be evidence of sort of sustainable commercial success for a product?
You know, yes, which is why I think that you know, and again, it also depends on what your strategy is. If you're an individual who sees something, whether it's Pebble or sees an idea that you like, and you're able to do enough due diligence where you have confidence that if you do make your contribution, or however it's termed, that the product will actually end up getting made, or that you don't get charged until the product gets made and delivered. You know, I think that there's a little bit of protection, but I think that certainly as you start looking at more structured investments, I think that these platforms reward those who are good marketers and good presenters, but in the real life world of business, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So, you know, I think that to the degree that you're able to filter out those who really put effort into it and those who are really diligent about their preparation, I think it's probably on balance a good filter.
So that's a sort of good segue into the question, say the Zach Braff film that sold at Sundance. There you've got obviously a view as to how that film will do based on its success in terms of funding, but it has nothing to do with whether or not it actually succeeds at the box office, right? So it's not necessarily indicative of whether that film will be successful ultimately, right? I mean, it will be relative to what it costs to produce.
No, you know, but I think that sometimes you see an indication from a marketplace that isn't necessarily consistent with what the research department says or what an individual executive sitting behind a desk says. You know, I think Veronica Mars is a pretty good example of going onto a crowdfunding platform and recognizing that there was a market for this franchise that the studio system had decided was no longer relevant, and yet the marketplace spoke and said, you know, we're interested. So it's no guarantee of success, but it's a pretty good way to pre-market a project.
Exactly. It's a branding exercise. I mean, there's no way to say Zach Braff's film is not successful. It's already in profits. You know, so already on a financial basis, yes, but what that did by actually launching on a crowdfunding platform, and you could say this about many things, it created nationwide attention and nationwide branding, you know, going in. Now, if people like the film afterwards, or if everyone liked their Pebble Watch or 3D printer, nobody can tell, but if you just, anybody watch Shark Hunt or Shark Tank? The first thing they ask, you know, is, what are your sales?
Right.
And here you can look, and you could say, I was on a site for 30 days and I sold, you know, 860,000, you know, sales at this price, and I've captured their email addresses.
But to your point, it does take more than money to make a great film. You need money, obviously, you can't do it without money, but it doesn't guarantee that because you have money, you're going to make it.
Well, I produced 45 motion pictures.
Right.
Some have even won Oscars, and I have to tell you, none of us went into it to make a bad film. You know?
No, I understand.
And a whole bunch of them aren't very good.
It's back to the false positive question. So, yeah, I'll move on to her. So, for Bertelsmann, you guys have a limited pipeline, obviously. You're a strategic investor. You look at a limited subset of things? Does this act as does this improve your feeder system, or is this actually competition?
No, I think it improves. I mean, we look at a lot of companies a year, so it's like, I think it's over 2,000 roughly. So we, but I do follow AngelList and see, I follow some people that, I think are, good investors and see what they're doing. I mean, a lot of the venture deal flow, I think, not yet kind of is really original, or at least the lead for that investment round is not necessarily found, I think, online. But if if there are a couple of investors, they've done the due diligence, or we've done our due diligence, I think I'm very open to kind of filling out the round, using a crowdfunding system to fill up the rest that you want to raise. Because I think one of the problems might be the due diligence piece that you mentioned. I mean, it's just looking at a video and doing some research that's not the amount of due diligence we spend weeks and sometimes months with company before we make a decision to invest. So that is, I think, I would still want someone to do that when I put my credit card into an AngelList. But it's a great site. It's if you're raising funding, you need to have an account there. You need to have. It's kind of almost like the LinkedIn version for anyone that wants to raise money in anything. So we look at it. We definitely.
Have you co-invested alongside of any crowd-funded companies that are raising follow-on rounds, or is there anybody, or are they more traditional seeds and
I think
Series A?
we definitely invested in some where the initial link or kind of the initial approach was via AngelList. But then I think at the end of the day in the syndicate there was no one, I think, that from AngelList at the end came in. But I would envision that's in the future.
So you haven't co-invested yet, but you think
Yeah.
that that's a source. So in terms of, obviously Bertelsmann has a strong European presence. Crowdfunding in Europe versus the US?
It's not, not as developed as here. But the problem in Europe is different countries, every country will have different regulation of what's allowed and what's not allowed. So, how do you call it, the contribution-based approach, that is, of course, that's there, that exists. And, we have invested in companies that, to your earlier question, that were successful on one of those platforms. But the equity investment piece, I don't think, at least I don't know any name that's kind of already far ahead there in that space.
So Elgin, what